We just watched Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, Season 1, Episode 5, Partings. What did you think?
I thought it was a retread of last episode. Like the events of last episode, everyone kind of got left off where they were at the end of episode 4. However, the difference being, I kind of enjoyed watching this one more than episode 4. Episode 4 was like, if I didn't feel like we had to watch it for the sake of the reviewing the season, I probably would have been like, okay, this is my exit point. But watching this one felt a little bit better. So I'm going to give it a 5.5.
Yeah, I have the same thoughts as the retread of last episode, but just a marginal improvements. Nothing crazy going on, just more of the same. So, that's, I guess, the writing was a bit better in terms of dialogue, but in terms of plot, the writing was exactly the same. But I agree. 5.5 for me.
All right, so let's get into the episode. We'll start with more like where the Harfoots are and what they're doing. So Harfoots are migrating still with the stranger. And I just have a few questions to ask you about what you think with the stranger. So who do you think he is at this point?
Now, my thought is Gandalf. The only reason it wouldn't be Gandalf is if for some reason they don't have the rights to the character. But if that's not the case, then it's got to be him.
Yeah, I was thinking it was Gandalf. I like all the things that they're setting up that made me think it was Sauron. I'm like, okay, now those are just like too clear of a direction. Like it's almost like a red herring in itself to make us think he was evil.
Like the red herrings are so obviously red herrings.
Yeah, and so then I came back to around. Well, maybe he's Gandalf, and maybe he's just like doing these considerably evil things like the fireflies and all that, like because he just doesn't know any better at this point, like he's confused. And so it could Gandalf or just one of those unnamed wizards that they've mentioned in the books.
Yeah that's exactly who I think it is. And on that point, if he doesn't know any better, one thing that came up in my mind while I was watching it is that they have an opportunity to present that character as like a moral struggle of like what is good and what is evil and explore those concepts within the story, because they have a character who's like true neutral when he enters the story. He doesn't know anything. He doesn't even know what good and bad is. And so by being like rescued more or less by Nori, who is, presented as a good person in this world, he's learning how to be good. And it would be interesting if like he eventually meets an evil person and learns, basically how to be evil, and then how does he choose between those two? And that's like a nature versus nurture thing where like, is it he's good or evil as he landed, or is it the people he's surrounded with make him good or evil?
Yeah, and on that point of like being with people who could be evil, in this episode we saw 3 figures who went to the crash site where the stranger landed. And presumably they're evil individuals. They didn't look very friendly. So, like, do you think that they're looking for the wizard or the stranger, to make him part of like the Sauron's troop, or is it like what do you think the goal of these people that showed up are? It's unclear right now.
Yeah, it's kind of confusing because they don't have any affiliation with anyone that's appeared in the story. But to be fair, the only true bad guys we've got are in the Southlands. Everyone else is either like kind of gray or they're good. So these people, I mean, they seem to be evil. They look evil. They act evil in the short time we see them. They don't look like Tolkien characters in my mind, but what I think they're doing is either hunting down or trying to recruit the stranger. It's got to be one of those two. Yeah,
my thoughts were that they were trying to like find him. It makes you think that they're finding him because, he's evil and they need him. Like they were looking for him to fall from the sky and whatnot. But I think that's a misdirection. Because like, maybe I'll try and explain it. Like the stranger, like we said, is presented as potentially evil, right? And we have these potentially evil people looking for him. So it might make people who still think that he is Sauron think that they're trying to like get him to remember who he is. like once they find him. But I think it's going to be that they're looking for him to get rid of him, because like to get him early before he becomes like a powerful wizard. That's kind of where my mind went, but that's a lot of speculation for like a 2-minute scene.
Yeah, I have nothing more than speculation to offer, but like yeah, it could be they think he's Sauron, like the tavern keeper Waldrig thought that the comet was a sign that Sauron returned. So maybe they're looking for their leader, and they were like followers of Morgoth or Sauron before, and now they're just like trying to find their master again.
Yeah, that's a better way to explain what I was trying to say. So yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking with that. But I think that kind of wraps up with the stranger, the Harfoots. Like, there's not much else there. Maybe we do see that the stranger is using more magic, like with the Harfoots in the forest, and Nori is now like scared of him because he was like healing himself in a pond or in like a little basin, and the ice magic like got onto her. So do you think that the Harfoots are going to start to distrust him, and like maybe he goes on his own?
I wouldn't say he goes on his own, but it'd almost be like the opposite of how it started, where Nori trusted him and the Harfoots didn't. Now the Harfoots trust him, but Nori doesn't. So it's just kind of a reversal of the situation at the beginning of the show. But for what purpose, I don't really know. But I could see them doing that. Just quick side note for anyone who ever played it, Lord of the Rings Conquest, the Y attack for the wizard is exactly the move that the stranger pulled. So he's a wizard, probably Gandalf. Okay. Confirmed.
So then we will go to Numenor, and they're preparing to get ready to help the Southlanders on Middle-earth. Galadriel has convinced them. She's strung along Halbrand in her little scheme. And so then, you know, that's what they're getting ready for. Isildur is trying to convince his father to let him onto the voyage. But, like, I don't know what they're doing with Isildur. Like, they're really making him hard to get behind. Because he keeps doing, like, intentionally sabotaging his own character or his own life.
Well, yeah, because first it was he almost gets himself kicked off the boat during training because he's staring off into the distance towards the west, if I'm remembering right.
Yeah.
And then he deliberately gets himself kicked off the boat later by letting go of the rope.
And not only himself, but his friends too. Like some of his closest friends, apparently.
Yeah, and so like those actions, we don't really know his motivations, to your point. Like, why is he doing those things? Because now suddenly he's got a new motivation. Oh, I want to go to Middle Earth and like fight with the like Numenorians.
Yeah, his convictions are so strong, like one thing to the next, that it's like you can't really keep track of like what he wants at the end of the day. Yeah. And I think like the reason why they're bringing like all this up, like with him being indecisive or failing to follow through, is because like we know that Isildur is supposed to put the ring into Mount Doom and like end that whole saga, but he doesn't. And like, is that why they're setting up all these things where he doesn't follow through on all these like things that he's involved with?
I think it's too inconsistent to call that a deliberate choice of foreshadowing. Like, I think foreshadowing would have been showing he's greedy or something, or like desires power, because that's what the One Ring represents, is power.
Mm-hmm.
And they haven't really shown that, so
That's too much credit.
I'm not agreeing with you on that one at all. I just think they're being inconsistent because they don't know what they want from him as a character yet. So hopefully they find out soon.
Okay, and then another prominent part of the Numenorian storyline has been Pharazôn and his son. Like, they kind of have their own scheme that they're trying to hatch. Or like, what is exactly going on there? Because I can't really follow what they're trying to do. I know what the son is trying to like stop them from leaving Numenor, but Pharazôn is kind of just going along with the plan to leave. And then they have a discussion where it's like, have you not thought about like the potential and like?
Yeah, I think Pharazôn thinks they'll basically make trade partners out of the Southrons and the Southlanders, and it'll make them rich and powerful in the long run, versus staying secluded and having an isolationist type policy towards everything won't make them rich.
Okay, so is he kind of changing his mind on the whole thing because he sees, like, the promise, and his son is just not, like, able to, like, he's too, strong-headed to see it, like his father?
Yeah, like...
Is it, like, showing the distinction between a seasoned politician and his son who's, like, basically just playing politician?
Yeah, I didn't think about it that way, where it's, like, if you compare the characters... It's like two different stages of politicians. So that's kind of interesting. But as far as Farazan, I think a comparison we could use would be like Littlefinger in Game of Thrones, where he just uses every opportunity to get more and more power, right? It's not like he's got an end goal in mind. The goal is just control and power and wealth, and that's what he sees this opportunity as being. So yeah, that's all I can think of with Farazan's character. So keeping in with the Númenóreans, what do you think is going on with Hallbrand?
Okay, so here's my thing with Hallbrand. He is a level 100 RPG character. He can do everything, like, perfectly, right? This episode we see him, like, forging a sword, and apparently, like, it's supposedly, like, very good. You know, the smither, he's like, oh, it's pretty good. And he's supposedly a king over in the Southland. He knows how to steal things, like, very smoothly. He's good at, like, chatting people up, right?
And fighting.
And fighting. So he's got, like, all these skills, but they're like directionless almost, because he's like flip-flopping between, like, I'm going to stay here, I'm going to go. And then I've heard, like, people try to be like, well, maybe Hallbrand is Sauron, and apparently, like, there's some, like, legs to that theory. Like, what do you think?
I think when I had a similar thought when they introduced his, like, when they showed his interest in, like, being a blacksmith in episode, like, 3, I think it was. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, because, you know, Sauron forges the One Ring, and, you know, to forge a ring, you need to know how to work metal. And then turns out he's really, really good at it, and he's good at fighting.
And he's manipulative and convincing, because there's that scene where Galadriel is in prison, and, like, Farazan comes to get her, and he, like, I don't know exactly what he says to Farazan, but it basically made him, like, instantly stand down, but he's just a commoner.
Yeah. So could he be Sauron? He could be. Do I think it's dumb?
And one of the things is Sauron is known to be, like, a deceiver among the people, right?
Yeah, so I guess in the lore, he appears as a character named Anatar to the elves, and he deceives them to his true purpose of being there. Like, he gets people to trust him, and then he deceives them later. But a few people, like, I think Galadriel never really trusted him, but Celebrimbor did, and so that led to the whole creation of the One Ring in secret, and it having power over the other rings, blah, blah, blah. So yes, he's a deceiver. He doesn't show his true self right off the bat. So, like, it kind of checks out because we don't really know, like, Hallbrand has a mysterious past still, and he's being really vague about it. Like, oh, the things I did to survive.
Yeah, all these very general ideas of, like, I don't know, he's like a shady character, but he never goes into specifics.
Yeah.
And then one thing I do want to bring up with Hallbrand is that he's an original character for the show. So, like, what's the purpose of having an original character? Like, we've got numerous named characters in, like, the Tolkien books and, like, writings. So, with them making an original character, two thoughts go through my mind. Is like, okay, maybe they had two characters that were very similar that, like, it wouldn't work with having two people on screen to do that one job, right? So you amalgamate them, boom, you got one character. Or you want to go so hard in a different direction than everyone who is familiar with your material is expecting, so you make an original character to do something that's not, like, lore friendly.
Oh, it's like everyone's waiting for Anatar to show up and be Sauron, but they create a Halbrand, so no one suspects it's an original
they're like,
character.
he'll just be an Aragorn, kind of like what we're thinking. Like,
well, I mean, they made him look like Aragorn. So.
Yeah, but these are like the quote unquote misdirections that the showrunners are like, oh, we're so clever, like we'll get them this way, and it's so crazy that it might be real.
I just hope if it is real that if you were to rewatch, like it'd be obvious in retrospect. That's the sign of a really good twist. Like
the subtleties,
The Sixth Sense, for example, the twist there. You rewatch it and it's a different movie the second time when you know the twist.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that's the case if they do pull off this twist, or even if it's the stranger that ends up being Sauron. Like you can see it coming. One
way is like so obvious, right? The stranger being Sauron. One way is so out of left field and crazy that it's like it might be real, but does it work?
It's so wild it just might be true.
Yeah, like it's one of those things. It's like he's an original character. They can do anything with him. Why not change it up and make him like because we don't really have a big bad, like Adar is a villain, but we don't know the like scale of his like evil, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if we get the Sauron figure plotting in the background, it might not just be like, my name is not actually Halbrand, it's Sauron. It might just be like we see him do something at the end, and then it's like, oh man, like he's going to be scheming for the rest of the series, right? So I could see that, but I really hope it's not.
Yeah.
For the sake of this show and my sanity, I hope it's not.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Speaking of Adar, though, Southlanders, same plot as last episode. They're in the Watchtower, they're waiting for the orcs to attack, and they don't have a plan.
Well, the plan is to defend. You either you stay and defend, or you can go and join Adar and do whatever.
Option 3, run away, but...
Yeah, no one seems to like take option 3 of like, well, we could just move areas. Like they're not like beholden to the tower.
Yeah, like one line could have taken that option away. Be like, oh, we don't have enough supplies to last us a day in the wilderness, or something.
We'll make it one day on the road with our current food shortage.
Which
I mean, they kind of addressed last episode.
They addressed a food shortage, but not as a reason for not traveling.
True.
Or they could be like the sick and elderly. We can't leave them behind, which would be like not the best one, but at least it's a reason. But excuse, as it is, it's like, we have to defend the Watchtower. Our only other choice is to bow down to them.
So I think the biggest discussion points for this one is that Arondir is shown the hilt by Theo, and he like instantly recognizes, oh, I've seen like something like this before, and they move these vines out the way, and there's a statue of Sauron, I believe.
Yeah, which is like, why is it in an elf watchtower unless they just took over the watchtower, which would make sense, but it'd be nice if they told us. Like, while he rips away the vines, like, we inherited this watchtower after the battles against Sauron, and this is like a mark of its true origin or something, but instead they just have a carving of Sauron.
Yeah, and they're like, oh yeah, I never thought about this thing until this very moment, and no one noticed it till this very moment. And then they say the hilt is a key.
To what? They don't know?
Yeah, what was do you remember the line?
It went something like this. The hilt is a key. It's what they're looking for. It's how they, like, enslaved your people. And then the lady goes, but what is it for? And then he goes, I don't know. It's like, it's a key to enslave people. A key to what? I don't know.
My thoughts are they aren't going to like actually address what it is for. They're just going to keep it as like an evil magical item, because that just seems like something they might build upon later.
Maybe it like brings Sauron to his final form. Because like, it transforms into a proper sword. Maybe when Sauron holds it, it transforms into like
his big armor, and everything.
12-foot tall Sauron.
Yeah, I mean that would be kind of cool, like a cool visual. But I hope that my thoughts with the hilt becoming like a sword and stuff is that eventually when they do battle these orcs, because it is going to happen, I think next episode is the Battle of the Watchtower. I hope that maybe like Arondir or like Theo or someone it's like it's a tough decision and they have to use it like last second to kill Adar or like kill like some orc that's about to get them. And then like it's one of those things, it's like it's evil, but like we need to use it at certain points. Kind of like the ring is evil, but Frodo like has to use it to get past certain parts of his journey.
Okay, like a necessary evil or a useful evil.
Yeah.
So it'd be like morally conflicting to use it, but necessary.
Yeah, and then maybe Adar's like, oh, I see you've used the hilt, it's corrupting you. And then like over this course of the season or series, like Arondir is like sick, like slowly become like sickly because of it. And then at one point it's like, I can't use the blade anymore or I'll become an orc.
It's taking my life force away from me.
Yeah, I don't know. It could set up like...
I'm down to 10 hit points.
It could set up a scenario like that, but that's just my wishful thinking.
Speaking of the Battle of the Watchtower, though, they hinted at what they're going to do next episode when they said, when those orcs come, this tower will fall. And then they both gasp. In the subtitles it says, gasp. And then it pans up to the Watchtower and it's like, oh, so they're going to collapse the Watchtower to stall the orcs until...
the Númenóreans will show up, and then that will be episode 7, is the Númenóreans show up, and it's the, like, Battle of Helm's Deep, where they're on their last legs, and Gandalf shows up over the horizon.
Oh my god, the stranger just pulls up out of nowhere.
No, he's too far away. But the Númenóreans for sure, like, it's gonna be, like, Galadriel rides in on her new, like, fancy armor, and they save the day or whatnot.
Yeah,
and Adar gets away.
At least it'd be plot lines intersecting.
Yeah, like we could finally see characters from like combine the plot lines and make it a little bit tighter.
Mm-hmm. Which I for one am looking forward to, because these separate plot lines, like at least when they come together, I think we'll get more of a sense of the direction of the show, because they'll be like they'll be forced to drop some subplots to combine everything, I would think. So then the plots that remain is like, oh, okay, this is what is important in the grand scheme of things.
I just thought about this. Okay, so when you bring them together, like Galadriel is so driven on finding Sauron, right? They have the hilt. It's a key. Key to what? Then that's maybe what the like Arondir's group and Galadriel's group have to like work on figuring out. Halbrand is there. Potentially Sauron, right? So he sees the hilt. Maybe he's like scheming to do something with it, like to mislead them or to get it for himself. I think that's like a direction I could see them going, is that they look into what its use is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that would be nice, because it's like what you said in a previous discussion, like Lord of the Rings is like an adventure where there's a goal at the end of it. And so having the goal to unlock the secret of the hilt could be something.
Yeah, it just gives you something like, oh, what are they going to do with it this episode? Or like, and the end goal of the season is this, and like they work on it, like kind of like with like Avatar: The Last Airbender, goal is to go take down the Fire Lord. Okay, but then each season kind of had its own mini goal. Like season 2 was they're in the Earth Kingdom and they have to, you know, figure out why they're being manipulated, like the king is being manipulated, all that stuff, right? Like you find like the driving plot per season, but the end goal is, you know, find Sauron.
Yeah. The last plot line of this episode was Durin and Elrond. So what did you think about those scenes?
I still like them. I really think that it's the best part of the show is Elrond and Durin, like the dwarves and the elves. It wasn't like that long. Like we ended up watching the episode twice, and the second time it didn't feel like as long. You know, like I thought.
Oh, okay.
Like it seemed like some of the shorter scenes in the episode. But it did bring up something important, that the elves are only going to be able to live till spring because their tree is poisoned, and they have to use the mithril to like extend their life source.
Yeah,
or to heal the life source, because it has the light of the Silmarils in the mithril. Yeah,
that's what we were told by Gil-galad, and then I think Celebrimbor basically backed that up in that discussion. Which is interesting, because I thought they were going with the elf-dwarf thing, was like building this tower and forging a great work. And now they haven't talked about that tower since like episode 2.
Yes,
or
a
the
few
beginning
episodes
of
ago.
episode 3.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I was kind of looking forward to seeing that tower completed. It was like, I don't know why, but I liked it.
I would like to see next episode when they go back to Khazad-dûm or wherever they're building the tower, that they, like, it's like Durin and Elrond are like walking around this construction site and then discussing potentially like how to get more mithril, and then it goes into like digging deeper and deeper into the mine, and then that leads into like the Balrog and like, you know, but like eventually, not just right away, but like set up those things, those events.
Yeah. It also, kind of a sidetrack here, but the reason we were given in, I believe, the Lord of the Rings trilogy as to why the Balrog came was because the dwarves got too greedy and dug too deep. But here it's kind of like, not retconning it per se, but giving it a different explanation, which is like the dwarves weren't greedy. They needed a lot of mithril to help the elves. And that could also be interesting because then if mining for mithril does bring about the Balrog, which we assume it will, the dwarves would blame the elves for that, for saying like, you forced us to dig so deep that we lost the entire city. So that could be like further divide the two races to the point where we see them in Lord of the Rings where they hate each other.
Yeah, like that would be a different, like something unexpected, but in line with what we know.
Yeah. And like,
and a good kind of play on it.
It's not a total retcon because it's like they got too greedy. It's like a one-line thing. Like, yeah, it's a bit different than how it was explained in Lord of the Rings, but like in an acceptable way, in my opinion, if they were to do that.
I would like it.
Yeah, so, yeah, that's just my thought on the mithril bit. And, yeah, you're right. Like, they say it's to extend the life force, or to restore the life force of the elves because the tree is rotting away. Am I remembering right? Was it poisoned, or it just started rotting?
It started to rot, and we saw that in episode 1, I believe, when Galadriel was being sent back to Valinor.
Oh.
The leaf fell down?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So, but really not much to say for me about those scenes, except for, I still like Durin, still like Elrond. So, we're going to wrap things up. What are you looking forward to in the next episode?
I want to see some big scale battle sequences. I think that'd be really nice. And then just move this along, because like we said, it was a retread of the last, where everyone was left off last episode. So I'd like them to move the plot. Yeah.
More of Durin and Elrond for me. A meaningful battle. You know, but mostly the intersecting plot lines is what I'm looking forward to. So hopefully we see that soon. That pretty much wraps it up for me.
All right. So this was these were just our thoughts on Lord of the Rings of Power, Season 1, Episode 5, Partings. If you liked our discussion, give us a like. If you want to see more, hit the subscribe button. And if you have any thoughts or comments, leave them in the comment section down below, and we will get to them. See you next time.